It's my unique and distinct pleasure to introduce Dave Koston.
Thanks, Ben. Just want to give you guys a little bit of my background. So I'm actually a former UD student. I graduated in 2005 with a degree in English. And so I've also built a number of internet companies, mostly based in the hosting industry, including Ben mentioned cPanel. And cPanel is basically kind of a provisioning system for web hosting. So if you want to go get a website, if you're going to somebody like GoDaddy or SoftLayer, they're using our product on the back end to go ahead and provision out those websites, as well as it gives you a way to add an email address or customize your site. That's a company I'm very proud of. We're actually doing over 100 million in annual revenue right now. And it's a company that just two guys from Delaware started, and we did most of it starting out in a little house in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. I also most recently was CTO at a company called Attracta, who is the world's largest SEO provider. We had about 3 million websites using our service, and we actually recently just sold that company for an undisclosed couple of $1 million, but it was a pretty nice success to go from 0 to 3 million customers in just about 3 years. So I wanted to come and talk to you guys. I'm really excited about the Horn program. You know, there was nothing like this when I graduated from UD. Entrepreneurship wasn't something that people talked about. Sure, there were a lot of college kids starting different businesses, but it wasn't open and people didn't share. And one thing that's not really talked about a lot in entrepreneurship even today is kind of the roller coaster ride that it is. You know, everyone likes to hear the stories of Zuckerberg and pool tables and ping pong tables and hanging out in fancy offices. But in reality, it's really a lot of ups and downs and struggles, and it takes years to build a really good business. So I want to share a couple of stories with you guys about how that works and some of the things that are, you know, not really in any MBA program book or talked about a lot. And so the first story that I'm going to tell you guys is something that has nothing to do with me. It's about a company called Blockbuster, which you may or may not be familiar with, depending on your age. And so Blockbuster was actually started in 1985 in Dallas, Texas, as a VHS movie rental place. And they had a couple stores, and they actually built up the company till their peak in 2004. And they had 9,000 stores, 60,000 employees, and over $2 billion in annual revenue. And the world was great for Blockbuster at the time. And just 6 short years later, they actually filed for bankruptcy, only had 1,700 stores left, which they sold at a fire sale. You know, $2 billion a year company sold these stores for $200 million. And today there's only 700 of those stores remaining. And people talk about a lot of different reasons for why Blockbuster died. You know, people say, oh, well, Netflix outcompeted them. And they don't actually look at some of the full story, right? Netflix is getting a lot of press right now for good original content. You know, House of Cards. They have a number of different movies that you can only get on Netflix. And actually in 1998, Blockbuster purchased the rights to 233 films to be provided only at Blockbuster stores. They also teamed up with a number of pretty good producers and production companies in Hollywood to create digital content and other content specifically for Blockbuster, which is very similar to the current Netflix model of today. But where I think Blockbuster actually went wrong is that they were focused on a product rather than a problem, right? In the beginning, they actually were started by a guy who did data warehousing. That was his big thing. So he could figure out which neighborhoods liked which movies and provide those movies from a big warehouse quickly as possible. And the biggest thing that made Blockbuster win was their efficiency, right? They could always have the movie you wanted in stock. You could go to the store, you could get it. And it was something that a small boutique video rental store couldn't do at the time. But what they were always constantly looking at was how to efficiently ship DVDs, how to efficiently ship VHS tapes. What can we provide in our stores to make it easier for customers? And how can we make those stores run more efficiently? And as such, they built, like I said, 9,000 stores across the country to distribute these movies. And what happened was people would go to these stores, and there was usually a 16 or 17-year-old kid in there peddling the movies, didn't really want to be there, didn't care, and they didn't really get a great experience. So along came a company called Redbox, right? And they cut out the 17-year-old blocking you from getting a movie, put in a couple of buttons, you get your DVD, you walk away, you're happy, right? And so they were kind of solving the same problem as Blockbuster, right? Which is people want DVDs, right? And unfortunately, that's not actually what people want, right? Nobody really cares about a DVD or a Blu-ray or HD DVD or any of these things, right? I just want to see a cool movie, right? And I don't care how I see it. And so a company called Apple and a company called Netflix came in and realized that if they just allow you to press a single button and obtain that same content, that's the problem that they were really trying to solve, was the problem of getting content to the consumer, not the problem of the best store or how to get a DVD as quickly as possible. And because Blockbuster was so focused on efficiency of their stores, building new stores, access to capital, and how do we improve the experience of a movie rental store, they failed to see that the actual problem that Blockbuster solved for the consuming public was actually just getting you the cool movie that came out 3 months ago that you really want to watch. And I think as entrepreneurs, this is an important lesson to follow because we often fall in love with the solutions that we've come up with. I mean, how many times do you go and think you're hanging out with your friends late Friday night, it's probably a little bit too late, so you start having these crazy ideas of, oh man, what if I could put some coating on my cell phone so if I dropped it in a bowl of punch, it wouldn't blow up, or how can I sync this, or how can I make a mount for my car that's better? And you talk to your friends and they're all excited about this idea, and you go and you kind of build a prototype. Maybe you even go as far as getting it on Etsy or Cafe Press or something. You go to sell and nobody wants what you have, and it's the hardest thing. You go out there and you're like, oh, well, I want you to buy this. And the first 20 people don't buy your product and you go, oh, well, they don't get it. Let me just go find more people and they'll figure it out. And you keep doing the same process. And after 6 months or 10 months, maybe you've sold $1,000 worth of your product. And I think what happens to us really early on as entrepreneurs is we get so excited about the ideas and the solutions that we come up with that we fail to realize that somebody else in this room might not solve the same problem the same way as I would. There's a lot of people that were huge on digital ink and digital ink pads, right, for taking notes in college classes. Oh, well, if I could just write here and then it would get sucked into my iPad, this would be great and I'll go back and look at it later. But in reality, everyone's already solving that problem with a notebook and it works really well. So no one's like, oh man, my biggest pain is that I don't have a catalog of scribbles from Economics 101 that's on my computer that I can access at any time. I mean, you guys are probably just like, okay, I'm done with Econ 101. I want to move on to something more interesting. And so there was a huge industry that spun up around providing a tablet that you can scribble on that goes into your computer, and they were really excited, and it's really cool technology. I mean, handwriting recognition, all this seamless syncing and everything is like an engineer's dream, but nobody cares because nobody really has that problem, right? And so this is kind of a segue into how I learned to love problems and hate solutions. And so early on in college, I got a call from my brother who had just started a company called cPanel. It was actually called Dark Orb back then, but I made him change the name because that's weird. And so he asked me, hey, do you want to do the books for me and work with clients because I need somebody that I can trust. And after I graduated college, I went and worked with them full time. And we realized that we had 12 people in an office building. 3 of them were working on the products. 9 of them did other stuff. It was just kind of a bunch of nerds that really love the internet that got together. And I couldn't really understand, because I was a remote employee, I couldn't really understand why we were so successful. I looked at our products versus other competitors in the market, companies like Parallels, companies like a DirectAdmin. They had a pretty similar interface. They offered similar features. They actually had VC, venture capital investment of hundreds of millions of dollars. They had seasoned entrepreneurial CEOs. And I couldn't really understand, why if those products look the same, would people use our stuff rather than theirs? And when I was in my office one day, I was working with my brother who was a CEO, and it just hit me because in the middle of what I thought was a really important meeting, he actually picked up his cell phone to go talk to a customer that had 5 copies of our product. And our product's cheap, it's $50 a month. So this guy pays us $250 a month, and the CEO would interrupt what we thought was an important meeting to leave and go talk to this guy on the phone about a small problem that he had with our product. And at that point I realized that's why people choose us over somebody else, right? If we have all the same features and we have all the same experience that you have, what happens when you have a problem with a product that you run your business on top of? And because our CEO was solving their problems, even for a small customer, people could trust us that even if they didn't know exactly what was going on or something went wrong, that we would solve it for them. And so what happened over the next course of years is I tried to actually embody that into our business. And I don't know if you guys have read a great book called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. He's the former, I guess, CEO of Zappos, which is now acquired by Amazon. So they were the first company to really do $1 billion in shoe sales online, which everyone said was crazy. You know, you got to go to a store, you got to try on the shoes. Why would anyone go online? But their core foundation is customer service. And one of the things, a cool story for them is somebody was buying shoes for their wedding from Zappos, and the representative realized that they wouldn't get there in time. You know, it was Friday, the wedding was on Saturday. Even with overnight shipping, it wouldn't be there. So she actually got on a plane and flew the shoes to the wedding for the customer. And Zappos probably lost, you know, $5,000 on that pair of shoes. But because of that customer service and that story that's been repeated through the market, they've probably gained $5 million on loyal customers for life. And so before even Zappos at the time, I took cPanel, and I, as an entrepreneur and someone who thinks, you know, they're smart and successful, wanted to be a part of everything. But I wasn't allowed to touch the products or most of the development work. You know, we had a guy that was a big tech guy. He was our developer. He was in charge of that. You know, he knows best and he should do that. So I was limited to kind of user interfaces and customer support and those other things. And when I looked at customer support, I saw this big gap between our CEO, who's taking a phone call for somebody that pays us $250 a month, and support techs who are in there day in, day out as their job to handle customers. And these guys, their attitude was totally different. It was, how do I get through this customer as fast as possible? You know, let me go in through these email tickets, and if I do 150 tickets a day, my supervisor will love me. I've solved 150 people's problems, success, right? But in reality, it couldn't be farther from the truth. You know, our software, one of the things that it does is it allows it so you don't have to be kind of a Linux nerd or a techie to run a web hosting server. You can actually just install it and then click through a bunch of graphical menus and provision out a website, provision out a WordPress blog or a restaurant site, add email addresses, things like that. And because it was so easy to use, even our customers like GoDaddy and other places who are providing these hosting services didn't really know how they were set up or what to do when they broke. So they would call us up and say, hey, you know, nobody's getting email on this server. There's 100,000 people who have websites with no email. I don't know what to do, right? And our people would be like, oh, don't worry about it. Let me solve it as fast as possible. And they would solve it, move on to the next one. And, you know, GoDaddy was like, oh, great, thanks, right? But none of that actually made us a better company, right? Because we were solving problems for GoDaddy, but we weren't empowering them to have a better business. And one of the things that we really shifted was we gave our engineers, our support engineers, complete freedom to take as long as they wanted on any issue, right? There was no minimum amount of issues you had to solve a day. If you solve one customer's problem during the entire day, no problem. And we actually changed it so that 30% of their pay disappeared and got sucked into this pool, which was based on customer feedback. So if customers said you were awesome, you could actually earn almost $70,000 or $80,000 a year as just a person answering phones for technical problems. But if customers said you were terrible, quickly your salary decreased and obviously you were no longer employed. And this major shift at our company actually shifted so many things that we didn't even think about, right? So it let our engineers talk to a customer on the phone or via email for longer than a 5-minute or 30-second conversation. And they started to develop these real personal relationships with all of our customers. And by the end of 5 months or 6 months from using our product, not only did the people understand our product because the engineers were willing to spend a lot more time with them, but they also knew us as individuals. And so they would call in and say, hey, I want Kevin to take care of this for me, or I want Brian to take care of this. And they couldn't get that with our our competitors, right? They couldn't just call up to our competitor and say, hey, Mark's a great guy, I want to make sure he handles this issue for me. They would just kind of be put in this big email queue of what to do. And so not only did we establish personal relationships with these customers, but that led to a different level of dialogue than you normally have. Most support experiences, you call up Sprint or AT&T or whoever, and it's awful, right? The person on the other end of the phone is reading off a script. You don't like what they're saying. They're not trying to help you. And at the end of the day, that support tech, even if you have a suggestion for them or whatever it may be, has no authority to bring that back and change anything about Sprint or AT&T. But with ours, we actually had the problem of too many ideas for features, right? Because there's so many different types of a website that you can have. You can have a restaurant website, you can be an attorney, you can have a blog, you can do e-commerce, you can do 1,500 types of e-commerce, you can be a Ruby on Rails site, you can be PHP, right? So there's infinite things that we could have built into our software. And all of those would have required a lot more than 3 engineers, right? So how do we pick what we want? We could set goals and projects and budgets, but then we would have probably spent $50, $60 million a year just on development. We would have had to get outside funding. Instead, we simply waited until enough customers had a specific problem that was handled by our engineers to then make it a feature. And so after 10 or 20 or 30 times when someone said, hey, it's awful, X, Y, and Z, I hate this, if you don't, this is a problem for me, we would then go build that into the feature for all of our customers. And this really actually simplified the whole development cycle of our company because our customers were actually telling us exactly what they needed rather than us kind of sitting around in a room and saying, oh, hey, we're smart guys, let's figure out everything that any customer could possibly need. And by changing our whole company to have the mentality of what problems do customers have, rather than what neat stuff can we build, we were actually able to take those 12 guys, go up to 75 people, buy a couple of office buildings, do over 100 million in annual revenue with no outside investment, with no business loans. And we were able to make the other market players extinct who were really focused on telling the market, that their product is the best and this is what they want and this is what they need. And, I think just the core takeaway that I want to talk to you about is the change in the linguistics, like the language that you use when you talk to customers because of this, right? We'll often go and make a survey and say, hey, I have a website that allows you to aggregate all of your classes, find the best route on campus, the cheapest parking, and the best food located to your classes. Would you like to use that? And you get a lot of people say, oh yeah, that sounds great. Like, yeah, I'd love to make my day more efficient. I'd like to get better food when I'm walking to class. Sure, right? But did you actually learn anything during that conversation? Right? Probably not, right? But if you talk to people in a way where you're addressing their problems and you say, hey, do you have any problems getting from building to building during your day with your classes? Do you have any problems finding food? You're gonna get a lot different answers. People are gonna tell you down to the dirty detail of like, oh man, I used to go to New York Hot Deli and Bagel, but cold is so much better. I don't think that one's there anymore. But and their bagels are great because of this and X and Y and Z, but I can't go there on Tuesdays because I have class, up by Toronto and I have to do this and this and that. And you'll learn these insights from people when they talk to you about what their real problems are and what really irks them about their daily life. And if you can pick up on those insights about when someone feels anger or hatred or excitement, right? You can build products around those types of things rather than building a product that someone says, oh yeah, I'd probably use that. Right? And I think this is ever so more important now that there's a lot less artificial spending money in the market, with all the business collapse and jobs aren't so stable. A lot of these businesses that were nice to haves, whether it be silly bands or frisbees or whatever it may be that people don't really need, have gone out of business or become bankrupt because they took advantage of all this extra capital that people are like, oh, I have an extra $300, like I'll go spend it on some stupid Nerf gun that's fun, right? But people don't have that money anymore. So they're only spending on what's a real problem for them. But entrepreneurs are still focusing on their solution or their idea or this nifty thing that they thought of on Friday night. And so I really want you guys to just think about what you're doing as an entrepreneur. What problems are you solving for people? And why are those problems so important that someone's going to give you money for it? And I just had a couple of bullet points that I wanted to go over of things that maybe are kind of counterintuitive, but I've found to be good in my career. The biggest one is that remember that when you're talking with other people, that things that are likely most obvious to you are most likely not obvious at all to them. And especially when you're interacting with customers, it can be easy to say, oh, well, that person just doesn't know better, or that customer's a pain in the butt, right? But they're not involved in your daily experiences and your technical know-how or your social skills or whatever it may be on a daily basis. So, just keep in mind that the world, like every single person sees the world through a different lens. And if you can try and go and break outside of the lens that you see in, you're going to gain a lot more insight than thinking that everybody should know what you know, or if they don't know what you know, they're not a good person or crazy. Another thing that I think is really interesting that I've been reading a lot about recently is the connection between our systems in our body that connect exercise and cognitive reasoning. And so if you, next time you're walking in a brisk pace to class, ask somebody, when they're walking, just say, hey, multiply 23 by 46. And I bet you every time they'll stop, right? And they'll think about that problem. And what you can recognize from that, and there's a lot of studies, is that our ability to move and function is actually using the same energy that we're using for complex mathematics and deep thought. And so people think, oh, if you want to expand your brain, you want to expand your mind, right? Like go listen to Mozart or play chess. But it's not true. You can actually go rock climbing or surfing or go to the gym, and you're exercising that same part of your brain and body that you would if you were actually playing chess or reading a RFP or reading a case study. So I think a lot of us get kind of wrapped up in the intellectual side of what we need to be doing in life, and take that type of physical stimuli for granted. But I can also send you a link if you don't believe me to a Harvard study. But really take it seriously and take that level of kind of physical fitness into your life, because it actually enhances your mental fitness as well. The other thing is, read everything you can, but also take it with a grain of salt. We all look at these companies that we want to be like, or entrepreneurs that we want to be like, the Elon Musks, the Apples, right, the IBMs, these types of pinnacle companies. But when you think about the millions of companies in the world, right, there are 90% of new businesses which fail, and then there's 10% of the rest. And of that 10%, about a thousandth of a percent are the Apples and the IBMs, right, and the Teslas and these other companies that are really cool. So it's more likely than not that someone who has started a business or written a book or whatever has actually not experienced this pinnacle of excellence that a lot of us are trying to achieve. So even myself, listen to a lot of people, read a lot of books, what they say, but you have to take it with a grain of salt, because there's a 99.999% chance that that person has never even experienced that excellence that they're trying to give you advice about. That being said, never let anyone else in the world tell you what success means, right? So many people are given this vision of success as acquiring wealth or acquiring power, or these other things which are actually not attainable, right? There's no amount of money that you can achieve that's a fact, right? If you have $1 million, what do you want? Oh, you want 10 million or 100 million or 1 billion. And there's no actual stop to say, okay, I'm successful, I've achieved anything. It's the same with power, right? If you're a local figure, you want to be governor, or you want to be president, or you want to be ruler of the world, right? And at the end of the day, none of those things are achievable in a way that says, I'm done, right? So it's much more important to take your life and think about, like, who am I as a human being and what am I doing for other humans that it makes the world a better place for all of us. And if you're doing that, then be happy and be successful. Or, if you love money and you want to drive a Ferrari, go do that. But don't let anyone else tell you that this X, Y, and Z formula is what's going to make you successful, because like I said before, 99.999% chance that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Right? And let's see. Yeah, I think I just have a couple of books that I think really helped me out in my career. One is actually a really great one called Crucial Conversations. And it's a great book that talks to you about how you converse with other people and how to identify their reactions and how the conversation's going. And it was just really insightful as far as, whatever it may be, doing a job interview or negotiating with a boss or negotiating with the customer. Another one is the Innovators Dilemma. And that's a great book that talks about looking at the problem, and it talks about a lot of these companies who, figure out how to make a widget and maximize 99% efficiency on the widget, and then just get totally knocked out of the market by someone who made something completely better. Another one is called Delivering Happiness. I talked about that before. It's kind of the story of, how a crazy guy could sell shoes online. Another one is The Power of Habit, and it's a great book that talks about why we do the things that we do on a daily basis and how we can change them if we don't like them. The final book is Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a New York Times bestseller one now, and it's essentially talking about the different systems, like I was talking about before. We have different systems in our body that interact, whether they be physical or mental, and how we use those systems. An example would be that by looking at that object right there, I know it's a brown chair, right? I didn't have to go into deep thought to figure that out, right? So that's a system that we use. But if that was a complex, differential formula, it would take me a long time to figure out exactly what that formula was or what the person was trying to achieve. So it gives you a lot of insight into how we make snap decisions versus long decisions and what kind of biases we apply. We have a big set of rules in our mind that tells me brown chair or math equation or projector, but often those rules may be wrong, and we need to challenge whether or not that actually is a chair or a projector or whether or not I'm here for a reason or what am I doing. And it's a really great book to just keep you thinking about those types of insights.